Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Richard Horowitz. I am the co-host of this Doctor Talk for the Healing Lyme Summit. And it's my great pleasure today to introduce you Lindsay Keys, who's a filmmaker who did a recent wonderful documentary, The Quiet Epidemic. So Lindsay Keys is a filmmaker, photographer, and writer based in the Hudson Valley, New York, where I am living. And she's co-director and producer of this recent award-winning documentary, The Quiet Epidemic. The film screened at more than 20 film festivals, had a limited theatrical run across North America, and ultimately premiered on Amazon Prime and Apple TV, iTunes in 2023, where you can see it. And Lindsay is now co-leading the Quiet Epidemic's Impact campaign alongside a team of impact producers and strategists who leverage the power of filmmaking for change. So, Lindsay, it's a great pleasure to have you here. You and I have known each other for quite a long time. Why don't you share with the audience who you are, how you got into this, why you made this documentary on Lyme disease?
Yeah, so I was bitten by ticks growing up. I did not know that all of my mysterious illnesses were related to tick bites until my mom became sick, and Doc, you saved her life. So thank you for that, as always. And then she saved mine. So my mom was the one who helped me piece together the fact that all of these symptoms I was having were related to what I thought were previously cured infections. They were ongoing infections. So in 2015, my health unraveled on every level. I ended up having to move back home in upstate New York with my mom, and she encouraged me to go see a local Lyme specialist. At the first appointment, the nurse practitioner asked me a really amazing question that I love to ask everyone now. She said, "How are you going to get through this? Do you have a passion?" She said that she found that patients at their clinic who had a purpose tended to have better outcomes. So, being a filmmaker, being thrown into the middle of this through my own illness, the illness of my mom, I declared that I would make a documentary about Lyme, even though it seemed very unlikely given the state I was in. It was a total mess. I could barely read and couldn't even hold a camera. My hands hurt so badly. But she looked really excited, and she said, "We have another patient here who's your age, and he's a filmmaker also with Lyme. Do you want me to connect the two of you?" So I wrote a note, and she handed it to Winslow Crane Murdoch, my co-director of The Quiet Epidemic, the very next day at his appointment.
So it was kind of kismet. It was like the universe was meant for you two to be together,
Yeah.
because here you are in a doctor's office for Lyme disease and connecting you with another filmmaker, right, to do this. It was like literally like the universe said, "Hey, you two guys need to be together to be making a
Yeah,
film." Right. So
exactly.
when did you
Yeah.
actually start thinking about this, about Lyme advocacy? Like, why did you decide to make this? You were sick. Like, it wasn't obvious you would be making a film and a documentary on the subject.
Yeah, I think for me, I was just so outraged by what I had gone through, what I was going through, I should say, and what my mom had gone through. And I think a lot of it, actually, it's funny, I haven't really seen it or stated it in this way before, but I think in part I was driven by guilt over not understanding my mom's situation sooner. And funnily enough, or it's not funny at all, it's awful. Ironically, I was sick myself, but I didn't know what was going on. So my mom kept telling me about there's this controversy, and the insurance won't cover it, and the test doesn't work, and you have to get this special test. And I was just like, what is she talking about? I couldn't even comprehend what she was sharing with me. And so I think suddenly, when I was thrown into the middle of it through my own diagnosis, started to speak with various advocates and experts like yourself, Doc. Thank you for being in our film. um, Suddenly I realized, oh, there's a story that is hard to tell, but that and because it's difficult to tell, people aren't believing it. And so I wondered, and so did Winslow, if we could tell this story in such a way that would make it believable so that nobody like my mom would be sick and have her own children not support or believe her, or that me, myself, someone in that situation wouldn't go 10, 15 years without piecing together that their illness is related to tick bites. So we saw this situation, we were thrown into the middle of it, And we wanted to make sure, or try to make sure, that fewer people had to go through what we went through to find answers and to get better. So
No, and that's beautiful. Kind of almost like you're paying it forward, right? Like
yeah,
you went,
100%.
yeah, you
Yeah, it
went
was
through
like
it.
we found out, like we found out how many people never get that diagnosis, right? And we've actually seen people, at screenings piecing together, oh my goodness, my daughter who was bitten by ticks on Shelter Island 10 years ago, she hasn't been the same since. And we've seen it paying it forward since then. And we can talk more about that later, but it's happening. So but yeah, it's really meaningful for me to be here with you right now, Doc, because you helping my mom is what led me to be able to get my own diagnosis and make this film. So it's amazing how we're all connected in this really beautiful and bittersweet way, right? It's a hard situation, but we're making the most of it.
So you're sick. You're making a Lyme documentary, not an easy thing to do.
Oh,
Winslow is sick, making a Lyme documentary, right? I mean, this is incredible. I mean, it's a tour de force alone, just thinking about what you did. So, with all the effort you put in, and I know what it took because
you saw it.
you were following Julia to India. You followed me to Amsterdam when I was talking. I watched, how much you were doing. Your ultimate dreams and goals, what did you hope to accomplish? Because it was so much time and effort you put into this. And of course, it's a wonderful documentary. I saw different cuts of it, of course,
Yeah.
along the way because you were showing me, and the final result was just wonderful. What
No.
was your final goal? What did you hope to accomplish? And did you know about the Lyme politics? You were discussing this earlier with the ILADS versus IDSA, because this is part of the film, and
Oh
you kind
yeah.
of linked it in. Tell everyone a little bit about this.
Yeah. So I did know about the politics early on because of my mom. So she was kind of filling me in. I didn't understand to what extent it was controversial and political, but to be honest, I was very nervous to make this film. Um, I was afraid. I was pretty afraid to venture into this territory, and I still am a little nervous at times because there has been retaliation against doctors and advocates and journalists and people who are, shining a light on what's going on with Lyme disease. So I was aware, but I just felt like I didn't have a choice. So, I just went for it. And I mean, one of the main things that we wanted to achieve was reaching the general public. We didn't want to make a film that just kind of stuck within the echo chamber of the Lyme community that already knows this history. We wanted to make a good documentary, not just a good documentary about Lyme, but a good documentary that would reach beyond the Lyme community and into the general public. And fortunately for us, we were connected with this amazing film team that are legends, Pennebaker Hedges Films. They've been making films for longer than Winslow and I had even been alive. And so they came into the fold a few years in. And yeah, I mean, we filmed 700 hours of footage over the course of 6 years. And we gravitated towards these stories that showed the struggle, but also demonstrated hope, and that our main subjects don't give up. And I think that that is what we really wanted to show. We wanted to show that Lyme disease is a really hard situation. We did not want to sugarcoat that because we wanted the general public to understand how serious and life-threatening this is. But we also wanted to show people who answered the call, and they didn't just roll over and just say, woe is me. They took this situation and they transformed it in a way that would benefit not just themselves, but others. And I think that's kind of in the ether of the entire creation of the film. That's mine, Winslow's story too. That's Julia's story. She's advocating for others. She's in a pre-med program now, as you know, Doc, which is so cool. And of course, Dr. Neil Spector, he changed the entire focus of his research to Lyme disease after getting sick. So we wanted to show relatable characters that were relatable humans, not just look at these sick, suffering Lyme patients, right? So that
Right.
people who are well could identify with them and not need the personal Lyme connection. And so that's happening, which is great. We also wanted to make a film that was rooted in the science so that we could reach the medical community and even skeptics. And I'm happy to say that that's also happening. So there was a review in Variety by this renowned film critic named Owen Gleiberman, and he had written a review of Under Our Skin in 2008, which was a great film for that time. It was great, but so much has changed over the past, 15, 16 years. And he basically said that he had written a hit piece of Under Our Skin in 2008 saying chronic Lyme doesn't exist. And then 15 years later, wrote a review of The Quiet Epidemic and said, I was wrong. This film makes the case that chronic Lyme does exist.
Which is, by the way, a big deal when you're getting a journalist to go 180 degrees in the other direction. I didn't realize, we hear about the courage of the Lyme patients to keep going, right? Like Julia and Neil, of course.
Yeah.
And, we hear about the courage of some Lyme doctors, right? Because you have to fight against odds.
That's
I
right.
didn't realize it required courage on your part,
Oh
like that
yeah.
you would actually take a hit as a
Yeah.
journalist telling a
Oh
story
yeah.
this way. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, what kind of pressure did you have, like in putting this film out, and what were the obstacles that you faced with this?
I'm so glad that you asked that question. Well, okay, so so many obstacles. I mean, I was afraid. I was just nervous, I had some weird things happening with my computer at one point, and it seemed like my computer may have been sort of like hijacked and maybe somebody was watching on my computer. We received some emails from the other side of this debate, basically saying our legal team is going to be very closely watching your film. Each time that something like that happened, I just had to come back to this like fierce knowing in my heart that like I know that we are on the right side of this. And and it's so much bigger than me and my comfort zone. And Doc, you're really inspiring too. I saw the way that you take care of yourself and the way that you put others, uh, you prioritize the care and the compassion of others. And so I just led with that and I keep leading with that, right? But something that was really challenging for us was when it came time to release the film online. And because of our teammate, Chris Hedges, who is one of the governors of the documentary branch of the Academy, right? The Academy Awards that we all know. I mean, she's in this field in such a big way, and she's friends with and knows all of the major platforms. I can't say the names, but all of the platforms that we all know. She had private conversations, personal conversations with many of the heads of those platforms, and they were all super supportive of The Quiet Epidemic. This is an amazing film. It's so important, but this is a liability to take on these powers where they, as these major organizations, were afraid to tell this story, which then it's just like, oh yeah, of course, that's why this story hasn't really been told yet, right? We kept wondering, this is so big, why hasn't this blown up yet? And it's because people are afraid to be the messenger of this story.
Right.
And
Speaking truth to power is
yes,
is never an easy thing. It takes a lot of
no,
courage. I think the surprising thing, because you and I know each other well, and I, of course, greatly respect. I know what it took for you to do this. I was watching you out on couches, exhausted, traveling all over the U.S. and the world to be able to do this film. I don't think people realize, by the way,
no, they
how
don't.
much work it is to do a 2 hour film. That was 700 hours of filming, right? I mean, that's a lot of filming to be able to do this. So your courage, by the way, I want to congratulate you, because speaking truth to power is never easy, but you understood how important it was to tell the stories
Oh
and to
yeah.
get the message out. And, and from my background, it's like you get a lot of karmic bonus points for that one, boy. That's not only building character, right? I mean, because obviously
Totally.
all of us who've been in this field have had to speak truth to power of what we know to be true, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So a question: unexpected results. You go
Yeah.
into this. You're putting so many hours and time in this, and
Yeah.
and the film explained a little bit, not only unexpected results, but how is the film a bit different? You mentioned Under Our Skin. There was a new one, The Monster Inside Me. How is the film different? How does it vary? And what were you not expecting to come out of this whole process?
Yeah. Well, I think naturally the film being, coming out 15 years after Under Our Skin makes it very different because the research has progressed so much since then. So in the film, we have, Dr. Monica Embers at Tulane speaking about her work. We have Dr. Ying Zhang, who is at Johns Hopkins. We have Dr. Brian Fallon at Columbia. And we filmed so many other scientists who didn't even make it into the film. And we will be rolling out extra footage on social media in the coming months, which I'm excited about. But so the science, that's huge. And, we have journalists like Mary Beth Pfeiffer and Pamela Weintraub. I believe she wasn't Under Our Skin, but Mary Beth Pfeiffer, like, we have these new voices, this new energy that's showing that this problem is not going away. There are new people getting into this field every single day, whether they're doctors, scientists, journalists, filmmakers. I mean, it's just endless. And so I think it was really important to show that it's not this old problem. People associate Lyme disease with the 90s because they were hearing more about it on the mainstream media in the 90s, which we also show in the film. May have had to do with the fact that a vaccine was coming out at that time. But yeah, so we needed an update. And I think it's different from The Monster Inside Me in that, I mean, most obviously because Winslow and I are patients and we decided not to put ourselves in the film. So The Monster Inside Me is a very beautiful personal exploration of the journey of this couple moving through chronic Lyme together. And Winslow and people did encourage us to put ourselves in it over and over and over again. But there were so many much more credible and reputable voices to speak about this, yourself included, Doc. And I mean, it was such a challenge to edit this film down to an hour and 40 minutes. It was painstaking. It took us almost 2 years in the edit to get this to a place where it felt solid. And it was fact checked by a very high powered legal team, which has held up. And yeah, so we just wanted to sort of make this like, we wanted to just lay it all out, and we could only scratch the surface even still, but we wanted to show the history, the controversy, how did we get here? And now that, after watching the film, people realize how we got here now, and through the film's impact campaign, we're talking about where do we go from here too, because it's a tough fight, as you know.
No, and it's even tough keeping up. I mean, you had 700 hours of film, but people like Monica Embers, just a couple of months ago, right? I've been doing this dapsone combination therapy now. I've published 8 articles in roughly 8 or 9 years. And just a few months ago, she came out in the mouse model that rifampin and dapsone is completely eliminating the infection, right? So even making a documentary like this with people like this, I mean, the science is constantly changing. So you might even consider doing an update, you said, on this, or kind of releasing some of this other footage at some point.
Well, this is the thing. So people tell us all the time, you have to make this film about Lyme and this film about Lyme. I will never make another feature film about Lyme disease. Not because I don't care, but because there are so many other stories to tell. And I think this was, it's been almost a decade of my life dedicated to this. And I'm focused on, the aftermath of the film now, the impact campaign.
Yeah.
But we do have social media as this amazing tool, right? So the film kind of catches us up to 2019, let's say 2020, which is when we stopped filming. COVID put an end to our filming. And now through social media, people can kind of tune in, and over the next, in the coming months and possibly years, funding permitted, we'll be able to bring people on to our social media and have Instagram lives with them and interview them in real time. We don't need to drag our gear all over the place and, make it all fancy. And we've already made our case. We made our case with the film, and now we can come in through social media and hopefully on our website as well with the updates on the science and the state of the treatments and the diagnostics.
No, that's great. Thank you. How do people contact you, by the way, if they want to learn more about the film, they want to help with this impact? We're going to talk a little bit in a second about this kind of impact that you're doing. I didn't realize you were having a major impact campaign that was going. I don't think most films do this after it's done. It's out. Tell people a little bit about how they can contact you. How can they help with this impact campaign?
Great question. So first of all, my email address is lindsay@thequietepidemic.com. There's also a general email. It's contact@thequietepidemic.com. And our website, there's there's a newsletter sign up, and we are also on Facebook and Instagram. So the impact campaign, this is it's not normal. And I will say that before I even met Winslow, I knew that I wanted to make a documentary about Lyme, and I wanted it to be an impact film. The first person I ever met with was an impact producer who is now one of our impact producers. 8 years later, I met her. I said, I want to make a film that makes a difference. And so we had this in mind from the very beginning, that we didn't want to just make a film, put it up online, and just kind of, move on with our lives. We understood that, especially with an indie film, especially meaning an independently produced and funded film. And I would like to acknowledge our donors at some point too. That's very important. This film was funded by very generous donors, 100% funded by donations. But we didn't want to just throw it up online and move on. We needed to push it out into the world and ensure that people actually see it, and not just see it, but also take action. And so there are a few components of the campaign that have been ongoing over the past, almost year now. One of them is the community screening tour. So anybody can sign up to host a screening through our website. We have had, I think, around 50 or 60 community screenings at this point hosted around the country and also in Canada. We have screening requests from other countries as well. And beyond the screening, they are followed by post-screening panel discussions like the one that you attended in Glens Falls, Doc, hosted by the Lyme Action Network. So it's really amazing to see people in their community bringing the film to universities, to their children's school, to local libraries, to community centers, even in their homes. And then they're able to have conversations at the local level of, how are we keeping our community safe, and who are the local resources that we can refer people to if they're looking for help, right? So there's the community screening tour side of things. That's ongoing. And that has included some medical school screenings, which we can talk about later. Um,
One of
I
whom
mean,
one of whom you and I know very well.
yes,
And another
exactly.
family member who's going to med school, and another family member who's going, right?
Absolutely.
This whole
The
family's been
Brzezzi
affected.
family. They're our main subjects in the film. Okay, brief anecdote here. They brought the film to NYU's medical school because one of Julia's brothers is studying there. And the reaction from the audience, which was mostly doctors and, faculty and medical students, was one of shock and surprise, and in some cases outrage, over having not learned this information in medical school or at all. Why haven't we been told this? This is what they were saying. If we had learned this sooner, it would have changed our lives.
So just to be clear, I want to make sure everyone out there who's listening to this, and by the way, in case you're just tuning in, this is, again, I'm co-host Dr. Richard Horowitz. I'm with Lindsay Key. We're talking about Lyme advocacy and the Quiet Epidemic, which is an amazing documentary on Lyme. If you haven't seen it, I would suggest either scheduling for an impact to get it to your community, or you can still watch it, I'm assuming, on Prime or on Apple TV and Amazon. Yes. So the amazing part about that is James Brzezzi, who I had been training, right? James would come up to my medical office for years, and he was training with me before, as he was in med school. And he told me ultimately in his fourth year, like, they were all surprised, like how much he knew, and what a great diagnostician. And of course, when you're with someone who's been doing this for almost 40 years, it helps. But I was shocked also to hear that in the med school where James was at NYU, these students in this day and age, in the middle of a full-blown epidemic, and why the name the Quiet Epidemic, I mean, really, that's the case, there was outrage by the students that they really didn't know enough about this and realize how bad this was. So that's really a surprising, I would have thought myself, even the medical schools at least give a little bit more information, even if they talk about the controversies.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, just look at the numbers of people impacted, right? And the fact that Lyme is a cousin of syphilis, and they have maybe a page, look for the bullseye rash, run the 2-tier Western blot. no discussion of the bans on the blot or how they're interpreted, which you did an incredible job of explaining, Doc, in the Quiet Epidemic. Even people in the Lyme community who thought that they knew it all reach out after watching the film and they say, oh my goodness, I had no idea about the test. They did not understand just what those bans meant. And so it's amazing that now more people are educated on that and they can advocate for themselves and their loved ones when it comes to, you know, the data that people are given from their diagnostic test. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, a page in an entire medical school education about Lyme and never mind other tick-borne illnesses, that's absurd. So it's great that the film's reaching these people and it's at least, you know, encouraging them to ask more questions. You know, we always say that the film, we could not cover it all. There's no way, but it's the start of a conversation.
Right. You know, it almost makes me wonder as you're describing this with this impact that you're trying to have, this impact campaign,
Mhm.
whether actually you may want to get a group of Lyme advocates together and see if they can get this in front of other medical schools. Because now that you're describing to me what happened with James at NYU,
Yeah.
maybe it actually makes sense to get a group of people with this impact campaign to try and bring it to the medical schools.
100%. That is one of our biggest goals. So we've screened it at NYU, Mount Sinai, and USC's School of Public Health thus far. And we're in conversation right now with some other medical schools as well. The good news is that we now have a 1 hour long cut of the film. So this is a brand new update. An international distribution company reached out to us and they wanted to bring the film to other countries and through a broadcast, which means, you know, an hour-long cut that would be shown on television stations and would be translated into other languages. So that's happening. The film's now entering other territories around the world, which is very exciting. But that also means that we have this 1 hour long cut suddenly.
So they're looking for a 1 hour cut for these other countries.
Hula. Yes. So we have a 1 hour long cut, which now we are able to take to medical schools. They'll be much more likely to screen it because it's shorter and, you know, students and faculty are in high demand. But we are hopefully returning to Mount Sinai this spring. After the screening that we had there last year, they said, let's keep doing this. Let's do this every year until this problem is solved.
Right.
And yeah, so anyone that has you know, the burning desire to bring this to a medical school and have a post-screening panel discussion. I mean, I can't name the name of the university, but we are in conversation right now with a team at a major medical university, and they said this film would be great at sparking healthy debate amongst doctors and scientists who are on both sides within their medical school. And I love this image. And I love this image of the film bringing together these two sides and encouraging a conversation, which, you know, may have been happening in their own silos.
Right. And really having that conversation is so important because even after 40 plus years, right, since Alan Steer discovered this with Willy Bergdorfer, we're still dealing with major Lyme, politics. And, that's why this year I hope to be able to fundraise and do the first randomized controlled, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial, multi-center on dapsone combination therapy, because we're seeing great results. And I can't speak about patients directly. I can tell you about my wife, Lee, who just, as you have had Lyme, I got it years ago, but I got it early, so I never got sick. But my wife had been sick with it for over 20 years, and she's now over 4 years in remission without one symptom. After addressing all of the factors on the 16-point MSIDS model that's, in my books, How Can I Get Better and Why Can I Get Better? But the dapsone combination therapy at the higher dose put her in remission. So, there is hope, and you need the dialogue, right? Because a lot of the patients, a lot of the doctors are just not aware. Are you able to say, by the way, the funders and the people who supported it? I mean, I can say it.
Yes, I want to. Yeah,
Yeah,
please. Thank you.
because
So,
because Mount Sinai also, where you mentioned, the
yeah,
Cohen Foundation is actually
exactly.
funding Mount Sinai to open up a Lyme clinic. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, exactly. So, yes, the film was funded by people who have a very personal connection to this illness and some who don't, but they're afraid that they might. They're worried about their children and their grandchildren. So, our executive producers are Phyllis and Scott Bedford, who are the founders of the Limelight Foundation. Limelight Foundation gives treatment grants to children who are sick with Lyme. They see a lot of pediatric Lyme, but also congenital Lyme disease cases, children who are being born to mothers who were sick and the children are born ill, which is a major issue. So Phyllis and Scott, they're our champions. None of this would have been possible without them, and they still are. They're helping fund our impact campaign as well, which is just incredible. But they also need help doing that. They want more people to come in and help us out. So anyone who, might feel inspired to join our team and actually fund this work, it takes a village. So yeah, Phyllis and Scott, the Stephen and Alexandra Cohen Foundation, crucial part of this story, not just our film, but the field at large. It's amazing to see the work that they've done and funding the research. And Alex Cohen and Ben Nemzer, this film also would not have happened without them. And the Bay Area Lyme Foundation, Lori Woods and Linda Giampa are two of our executive producers. They're funding incredible science as well. Isabel Rose, she's the founder of Mothers Against Lyme, which is a group focused on congenital Lyme disease. She's one of our EPs. And Serena Snyder, who is a person who's personally impacted. She's become a dear friend over the years, and she's also a journalist. So those are our core funders. Some of them actually wish to remain anonymous, which is also interesting. They're like, we don't need our names on it, just go change the world. And it's so cool to see that there are people out there who really just support the arts and understand the importance of independent filmmaking too, right? Because there are a lot of media organizations out there that have financial ties that complicate their ability to speak freely about the issues that we're
That was a
facing
very
in
good
healthcare.
word. That was a very good word you chose. Yes, you were very careful in it. They complicate the matters as opposed to
Complicate.
obfuscate. Um,
Corrupts. Yeah, it complicates it. And I think it's so important that we as, in the general public really have a critical mind about where we're getting our information from and who's funding the outpouring of that information. And some people would say, oh, well, you were funded by the Lyme community. So, but yes, but we had the film fact checked by a legal team that had no connections to Lyme disease whatsoever. And we were just relying on facts. We really tried to maintain a center in telling the story. We tried not to go too far into the anger or too far into, these like more extreme accusations, which we could have made probably in good faith, but we tried really hard to just hold this center again so that it could reach these and open these skeptical minds.
right. You didn't, in other words, you didn't want to start with Plum Island and basically and
Yeah,
basically have a drone over Plum Island with
exactly.
secret research facility, right? You
Danger,
didn't want to start
danger.
the film there, right?
No, we did not want to start the film there at all, although that is an important conversation. And I do look forward to hopefully bringing Chris Newby onto our social media at some point this year to talk about her book Bitten and the work of Willy Burgdorfer. But yeah, that wasn't our story to tell. And I think we're all just chipping away at the same block here. But the other thing I wanted to note about the impact campaign that's very important is we're taking the film to Congress. And we have been working for, I guess, about 6 months now with a congressional impact strategist and producer. Her name's Bonnie Abanza, and she has worked on many human rights issues.
Mhm.
So she's not a Lyme advocate coming in. She's a human rights advocate coming in, and she watched the film and she said, I want to be involved in this. I think that this film could actually move the needle on this issue. And she has helped get legislation passed in the past with other films, and she is now leading the charge to set up a bunch of meetings this spring. Ideally, if everything goes according to plan, we will be going to Congress and with very clear calls to action, one of which is that we want a congressional hearing on the state of Lyme disease diagnostics and therapeutics. So in 93, there was a Senate hearing called Lyme Disease, a Diagnostic and Treatment Dilemma, hosted by Senator Ted Kennedy. I was 4 years old when that happened. And look at my path. I'm doing well these days, by the way, thanks to doctors like yourself, Doc. Thank you for helping me regain my health. But I shouldn't have gone through. I mean, there should be a test that works, and there should be a treatment that's
Right.
offered, right? So
Right.
it's I was 4 years old when that hearing happened, and the as far as the clinic goes, what's happening in these clinics around the world, people are still following the IDSA guidelines, which are endorsed by the CDC. They don't know that there are other treatments available. They don't know about the ILADS guidelines. They don't know about the other testing, right? So we really want to call for a hearing where we can bring people to the stand who can give testimony and get this on the record. Because, and I always say this, even if everything was solved with Lyme disease tomorrow, we have a cure and we have a perfect test tomorrow, this story is still so important. It is important that we get this situation on the record so that things like this don't happen again with other
Well,
illnesses.
and it's stark, right? I mean, the CDC reported just the year before that it was almost 500,000 cases, 476,000 known
Known.
cases of
Exactly.
Lyme disease. The
Yes.
average, they're saying from prior studies, 2 million post-treatment Lyme disease. Truthfully, we have no idea
No
because
idea.
5% of the US population has chronic fatigue, myalgic encephalomyelitis, and fibromyalgia, which means at least 18 million people are walking around with a chronic fatiguing, musculoskeletal, neuropsychiatric illness, and it may be Lyme, right? Not just viral infections. And you and I both know regarding congressional advocacy, one of my highlights, by the way, I would say in my career is when you and I got in my Tesla with 535 books of my last book, How Can I Get Better, which we fit in the car
Can't
with
believe
your
it.
equipment to film and both of our luggages. And I went, how am I going to fit this in my car? And it was like, we went to Congress. You and I were walking around the Senate,
We
giving
did.
out the books, right? We were there when Comey actually was
That's right.
testifying about Hillary. I mean, we were there on the day when this whole thing broke, right?
Mhm.
Which is in the film. For those of you who have not watched it, you've
Yeah.
got it on the screen in the background. That was the day we were in Congress, kind of trying to raise advocacy while you and I were there.
Yes, it's so important that we keep going to Congress. And this is the thing, right? May is Lyme Disease Awareness Month, which is great. People tend to converge around that month. We do too. But we need to just, this needs to become a year-round thing. And I know that everyone has different bandwidths, and it's really not fair to put the entire burden on sick and suffering people. I think that's part of why, it's been hard to make certain changes in this situation because everyone is just maxed out, right? The doctors are maxed out, the patients, the caregivers are maxed out, the foundations are, you know, just hustling, trying to raise that money for the research. And that's why, again, I think galvanizing support from the general public is going to be so important because that's what changed things with HIV/AIDS. It was healthy advocates who showed up and they were marching in the streets on behalf of the people who couldn't. And I think that, through this film, we have the ability we are a megaphone, right, for what's happening. And behind all of these closed doors, as while everyone is tirelessly working and trying to, push progress or just stay healthy or take care of their loved ones. Like the film is out there speaking for us. It's out there right now speaking for us. People could watch it any day, and all of a sudden these things that we know and that we sort of take for granted, they have their own aha moment of realizing, oh my goodness, I had no idea this was going on.
Right. And,
How
and,
can
and
I
you bring
help?
up and you bring up an important point from the patient standpoint, because a lot of times with family members, they really don't understand what the patient is going through. And by producing a film like The Quiet Epidemic, you give people a viewpoint into
Yeah,
people's lives who suffered with this, like especially
yeah.
with Neil and Julia specifically, but others, and you show them what this is. And I think maybe speak about this a bit. A lot of people have walked out of their family members specifically going, "Oh my God, I had no idea."
Yes, I'm glad that you mentioned that. I'm going to move my camera a little bit because I'm like getting blasted by the sun, or at least so it's even. Okay, there we go. Um, just a little powerful anecdote here on that note. This was a surprise impact of the film. That was one of the questions that we had talked about. It's like we had an idea of certain impacts, and we have, yeah, these huge goals of we want to go to Congress, we want a hearing, we want the doctors watching it, we want, we want insurance coverage, we want, the ILADS guidelines to be acknowledged alongside the IDSA guidelines, right? All of that and more. And yet that real human impact, like you just described, Doc, the family members watching this and realizing that has been so profound. I'm going to try really hard not to cry while telling this story. I cry almost every time, even though I try not to. At our world premiere at the Hot Docs International Film Festival in Toronto, we were there. Julia was there. Enrico was there. We were on stage, our team, and it was the first Q&A we ever had. We had no idea how people were going to respond to the film, right? And the amazing thing about film festivals is that you have general audiences. It's not just a bunch of people with Lyme disease. It's like a bunch of people who just like documentary films. This hand goes up and oh no, it was just nerve-wracking. You spend 7 years of your life on something and it's so deeply personal, and it's just like you want to make everyone happy and you can't. And this woman just burst into tears and she said, "Thank you. This was the first time in 20 years that I've seen my story told." And then she just started sobbing, and she couldn't even say anything more than that. But it was just, I think that made it very real for the rest of the audience who may have not been impacted by Lyme, where all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, this person who's sitting right there, who like otherwise just looks like a woman in maybe her 40s, or what? But what was even more profound was after the screening, we were in the lobby and she was there with her two parents. And they came up to me and her parents said, "We need to thank you because this is the first time in 20 years that we've believed her."
Wow. Wow. It took your film for the parents to turn to the daughter and go, "We finally believe you that you weren't making this up. It just wasn't in your head like you was some crazy." Oh, that is profound. That is
Yeah.
profound. That really touches your heart, right? Like, wow, I made a difference in the world. And by the way, even one person like that, when you
Yeah.
change a lot, I mean, it's
I
like it all
know.
makes it worth it, right?
And what's amazing is that we've seen that happen over and over and over again. And, we've probably in person attended, I don't know, at least 50 screenings of the film in person at this point. And, people come up and talk to us afterwards, but they also send messages through social media. And I've heard that from so many people that watching the film brought their family back together. So it's helping people mend their relationships. And I know that we all are really longing for a cure and a test that works, and yeah, all the things that I mentioned before, insurance coverage and on and on and on. But the power of belief, of having somebody believe you and be there for you and care for you. I mean, that's the beauty of the Bruzzese family that shines through in the film. You know, when you have people who rally around you, you have a much better chance of getting better.
Right. And
And
and most people, by the way, don't have fathers like Enrico Bruzzese. The man is a force of nature. I've been over there for Christmas.
their food
And
is
I
also
think,
a force of nature.
right, a whole nother story to go with that. But when you see the way parents can rally, also
Mhm.
great point around children, it's heartening, right? Because some of us have had dysfunctional families
Right.
growing up. You
Yeah.
get to see, like, even if
Oh,
people have not always gotten, together or they had issues, the way they rallied around it, it was such a beautiful thing to see and still to see.
absolutely. Yes, it shows us what's possible. It raises the bar for everybody, how to show up in a challenging situation. I think some people would rather just plug their ears and look the other way and pretend it's not happening, but that doesn't make it go away. And Lyme disease is actually an opportunity to really deepen your relationships. It shows you who your real friends are, but it also provides an opportunity for forgiveness. I had some friends who did not show up for me, and years later, we had conversations about that, and I could understand why it was scary for them to see someone their age in our 20s at the time, basically like fall into multiple sclerosis and dementia over the course of, a few months. I spiraled quickly at the end. And um, so
And by the way,
Lyme is an opportunity.
people should
Yeah.
know that during these 7 years that you made this film, it's not like you were well
No.
the entire time doing
Oh
this. I mean,
God, no.
so I
So
mean, again, talking about the courage, the stamina, the goal of I have to help the world with this, right? Just one person's motivation. I mean, you and Lindsay, together with Winslow, putting this, on film for people to see. Think about how many lives now it's touched. I mean, I'm sure, were there other unexpected things I know when you start making a film and you're putting this much time and effort, you have maybe certain expectations. Are the ones that were met and ones that you're actually really, I think the family one was someone you were surprised at. Were there any others?
yeah, I think one of the other surprising impacts of the film has been, I have scientists reaching out to me. I'm like, I'm a filmmaker. Like, hi, like, we have this idea, like, can you, like, we want to, like, we didn't understand, like, they watched the film and they're like, oh my God, they need help. This community needs help. And so it's been really cool. I have some teams reaching out to me, like from around the world, even just saying like, how do we get involved? Like, how do we get like saliva samples or blood samples? I'm like, okay, you need to talk to the Lyme foundations about this. And I can connect them with the right people. But I think that's been pretty cool to see, because this is the cool thing about documentary is people just like documentaries, people from all walks of life. And so you have all sorts of people who are watching the film who might watch it and say, oh, I can get involved in this with whatever their niche is, whatever their, line of work is or whatnot. So that's been pretty exciting. I'm like having Zoom calls with like teams of scientists and stuff. It's so weird.
Oh,
And
I didn't know. This is the first time I'm hearing this from you. I mean, you guys speak from time to time. I didn't realize that that was an outcome. That's amazing, actually.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
you've actually gotten other scientists involved who want to do
Yeah.
this after seeing
Oh
the film.
yeah. Yeah. No, that's been really fun. And also people who are aspiring Lyme doctors now, and they didn't realize that, people just they didn't know. And just like I didn't know until I was thrown into the middle of this. But now people can watch the film and they can learn without getting sick themselves. And that was like, that's the biggest goal, because everyone says in the Lyme community, you don't know until you know, meaning like until you're unraveling or someone close to you is unraveling from tick-borne illness. But what if it didn't have to be that way? What if someone just like watched a film and felt like this, purpose ignited in them, and then they, went for it without having to fall ill, to be called to action. So
No,
I
of
think
course.
that's been part of it too. Yeah.
And and regarding the congressional advocacy, because you were there with me in Washington,
Yeah.
D.C. But I mean, I served on the first round of the HHS tick-borne disease working group, and we came in about a year late, and they needed to get a report to Congress right within a year. That was the way Obama had written, the laws with it. And I must have put in 40 hours a week, right, for free for the federal government. And it was basically in service of the American people, trying to, you know, give Congress more information and understand the severity of this. And what's even a little bit frustrating, because, it's over now after 6 years, is I think the needle may have moved a little bit. Like I think my private conversations, maybe with certain members of the CDC, the NIH, the FDA, the Department of Defense, because they were all involved in this.
Right.
I think maybe they believed me after hearing my stories and let me quote science and doing this. It made a difference. But boy, the politics are still not great even at this point,
No,
which is why for me, I'm this year going to be, fundraising and hoping to start a multi-center randomized controlled double-blind study on dapsone, because I've now seen enough positive results. I'm convinced of the results. There's no doubt that I have found, if not a cure, and I don't know what is a cure. I mean, it either could be I'm really knocking fully the bugs, or what's more likely, I've knocked out 99.9%. The immune system's handling it. But for all intents and purposes, people go live their lives for years, like my wife and others now who are in full remission. But it's so interesting because even though I publish article after article on dapsone, and here's the protocol, and here's how you do it. I still can't get doctors to do it because they're worried about the side effects of dapsone, which is, by the way, part of the reason I'm doing this summit is to keep educating people about this, because just like you kind of had the aha moment, I need to do this to raise awareness. It's the same thing for me. And it's really step by step. This is a very slow process of changing this particular field where you'd think, considering it's an epidemic proportion across the world, the politics, I don't think anybody who hasn't realized like what this is, they would never know the politics are this dysfunctional that, you had to make a film like this to raise awareness. And
Right.
I have to keep publishing articles on DAP, right? I mean, this is what it takes.
Wild.
All of us do our part, right?
All of us do our part. And yeah, I think it's like important to make that clear, Doc. Like you said, like I didn't aspire to be a Lyme documentary filmmaker. Like this was not the plan, this was not the plan. And so it's like, clearly it's an issue when so many people are being called to dedicate, years, decades of their life, a lot of it, yeah, unpaid or not paid enough. I mean, the sacrifices that me and my team made financially, like personally, to make this film, even with all of the generous support that we had, is like it's like altered the course of my life, and but that's how big of an issue this is, and that's how important it is. And so yeah, we're all making these sacrifices, and hearing you talk about your study and needing funding for that just reminds me too to note that part of what we're going to be you know discussing with Congress when we go there is that, yes, we need more research funding for Lyme disease, but we also need that funding to go to very particular people who have been on the front lines of this, and not the same people who sort of churn out the same findings year after year that just maintain the status quo that benefits their professorships and their careers and their products, right? We need the funding to go to people like yourself who are actually with these chronically ill people and who have a vested interest in getting them better. And it seems so obvious, but the research funding, when it's controlled by the same group that is just self-sustaining year after year after year, it's no wonder that it's been so hard to push
No,
them
and
forward.
and that's why, like, for example, I had a very nice grant from the Bay Area Lyme Foundation years ago to do my precision medicine 1 and 2 studies. The MSIDS Research Foundation, which is a 501(c)(3 I founded, has helped me to publish. But you're right. I mean, this is really a village that's coming together to do this. And by the way, when you do go to Congress and do this, that my hand is up here to be able to help if you need it, because I have given both of my books. I got, when Chris Gibson was in Congress, my first book, which was a New York Times bestseller, Why Can't I Get Better? That went to every member of Congress through Chris Gibson. And lately, you and I started doing it. And but I've been doing the same thing. And I think eventually every piece of this, we're just chipping away little by little with these these books, sending letters. I think you and I both agree it is going to change.
It is.
It's just been slow in the process, but I feel like we're reaching a critical point very soon. I don't know if you can feel it also, that we're very close.
I feel that. Yeah, I feel it because I think the advocacy has become so powerful, and meaning some of the people who are getting involved they themselves are powerful. They have the power to shape not just the science, but legislation. And like you said, the Cohens are funding this research at Mount Sinai, the center with Dr. Petrino. I'm very excited to see where that leads. It's too big at this point. It's the cat's out of the bag. And I think that the people who were trying to keep the cat in the bag for decades didn't know that the internet was coming. They didn't know that social media was coming. They didn't know that millions and millions of dollars through these private foundations that we've mentioned, that was coming. And it's all just reaching this boiling point right now. And I mean, it's it's only time until they're personally impacted too. And I don't wish this upon anybody. I would never want to give that impression, but just given how many people are impacted, the people in government should be concerned. The people at the CDC, the NIH, the FDA, they should be concerned. What happens if their child gets sick? How do they get their child better when the research has been stunted for 40 years, you know? And thank goodness for, yeah, the Cohen Foundation and Bay Area Lyme and Global Lyme Alliance for pushing the research forward. But how do we get the CDC to pay attention to that research and actually endorse that research?
Well, I will be speaking with Ben Beard from the Live Lyme Foundation from Holiday Goodrow, who served as co-chair on the last round. She knows Ben very well, right? She's in Colorado, and I know Ben very well, and he's really hell of a guy. He's a lovely man, and he gets it. And from my conversations with him, it's not even just a problem with the CDC. The problem is in part with the politics with the NIH. There's a whole
Right.
that's a whole hour discussion.
Totally.
But by the way, we're getting to the end of the interview. We're almost at an hour. So any
Talking
last
about
thoughts?
that.
We've just got like 2 or 3 minutes left. Tell people again how they can contact you to be able to be part of this impact campaign. Let people know.
Yeah. So thequietepidemic.com, that's the hub for all things. So you can find our newsletter, sign up there. You can find our social media there, follow us on social media. You can reach out to us via email. I think, the film is out there. Just post about the film as much as you can, right? If each of us got every person close to us to watch the film, and then they got every person close to them to watch the film, that's how we create this ripple effect, and so it's out there. It's on Amazon Prime. It's on Apple TV, iTunes. Yes, you have to rent it for $3.99, which, it's one of the most important films, I think. And I'm biased, of course, because I made it. But as a patient, never mind filmmaker, as a patient, it's one of the most important films that you could watch to protect your health and your family's health. So get involved, reach out, sign up to host a screening. Please pay attention in the coming months, because as we roll out this congressional push, we will be calling on our followers and our community to send letters, to make phone calls. We'll be providing all the scripts. We'll be providing pre-written letters. We'll make it as easy as possible for everyone. We just want to flood Congress. We want to flood Congress, and we really need the community. We're a tiny team. We're a very small team. So there are power in numbers, and for better or for worse, a lot of people are impacted and care about this issue. And I do think that we're getting close.
No, you're absolutely correct. And Lindsay, I want to thank you today for those of you, again, who've tuned in. This is Lindsay Key. She is the filmmaker with Winslow Crane Murdoch about The Quiet Epidemic. It's a wonderful film. Lindsay followed me for many years with Julia during this film. I saw what she went through. And I can tell you, when I went to Glens Falls for the screening, I was even surprised the quality of the film, the final result, because I saw pieces along the way. It's just a wonderful film. I advise everyone to please see it. So, Lindsay, thank you so much for taking the time today. It was great speaking to you. And for everyone, again, who has joined this particular episode of The Doctor's Talk, I am the co-host, Dr. Richard Horowitz, with my other co-host, Mariah Hinchy. We are doing this series for you, right? We're doing the Healing Lyme Summit for you, for those of you out here, for the doctors, for the patients, so you can gain the information and the power of knowledge that you need to be able to get better. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope to see you soon.